Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to Her Stories. I have another great episode, and I'm super excited to have my special guest today, Paula Lowe. Welcome, Paula.
Thanks, Elaine. So excited to
So
be here with you.
I'm super excited, and this is I can't wait to tell the audience of what we're going to talk about today. But as I kick off every Her Stories, I always go through why someone inspires me and why I want someone to hear their inspiring story. So I've known Paula for a long time. We worked at an agency in Boston, and Paula, from the minute I met her, was this kind, insightful, complete go-getter. Any hurdle in her way, she would jump over it with spades. She's super intuitive, sees things that most people don't see. I just gravitated toward her pretty much the first time I met her on a roof deck outside our agency on Boylston Street in Boston. And over the years, I've really been intrigued by her passion, what she sees around her, and what she can see through different connections. I think I've mentioned the relationships you have are bar none. You just have this close connection to people in general. Animals, I always joke that your love for animals is also incredible. But that leads into this topic is really about mediumship and having that connection with someone that maybe isn't on our current plane, someone who's passed away. And I'm just learning from you, and I'm super intrigued. So I'd love you to talk and just, introduce yourself, and then let's get into it. And I know I'll say some terminology potentially wrong, but I want to learn from you. So, please introduce yourself, Paula.
Okay. I'm Paula Lowe. I am a full-time marketing and PR professional, but I found out that I had the gift of seeing spirits when I was a little girl. And it scared me back then. It was not something that was common or that I understood.
At what age do you
Um,
remember?
the earliest age I remember is my dad telling me I would wake up screaming that there was a man in my room, and I recall waking up many nights seeing a man standing by the side of my bed, and he was as real to me as a real person. I could see him clearly, and he would come in and he would walk around the room like he was looking for something, or he would stand there and stare at me. And it just scared the crap out of me. I was 3, 4 years old.
Wow.
Then I was in that same house when my parents were married. I think I knew the house was haunted, if you will. There were
Mhm.
spirits in it. And I was sitting one day playing in the spare bedroom by myself, and all of a sudden I felt like I wasn't alone, but there was no one in the room. But I knew there was someone in the room. I remember just kind of looking around, and I jumped up and ran out of the room, and I said, "I'm not playing in there." And,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think I
wild.
went back in there again while we lived there. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's wild.
early experiences. Then, when I was about 8, my great grandma passed away, and I was sitting in class at school. It was a gorgeous Indian summer day. Sky was blue. It
Mhm.
was end of September, early October, and the music teacher had brought a video down to our room to show us. And back then, not all video had audio, so she was playing a record uh, that gave us a sense of how music can shape what you see and make you feel
Mhm.
different things. And I remember all of a sudden it was as if someone pulled a shade on the window. It got dark. And I looked out the window and I looked at the clock, which was sort of ahead of me in the classroom. And for a good 10 or 15 minutes, I kept looking outside and back and out and back. And
Mhm.
after about 15 minutes or so, it's like the shade was lifted, the sky became bright blue again. Nobody else noticed. I'm looking around the classroom. I'm like, why is nobody noticing what's going on outside? Um, and it was strange, but whatever. When
Yeah.
I went home from school that day, my mom was on the couch with her head in her hands crying, and I stopped in the door and I looked at her and I looked at my father and I said, Nana died, didn't she? And they were like, my mother's head popped up and she said, how'd you know that? And I said, I don't know. I was all upset. It was
You're
odd. And
giving
it
me
was,
chills, by the way. Twice you've given me chills already. That's wild. Wild.
yeah,
I
it's
never heard that
just,
story. That's wild.
yeah. That's a very big part of it for me. I remember being really uncomfortable, really scared. And I said to my dad, like, why did that happen? And he said, honey, when my grandma died, we were very close. And he said, sometimes when people pass away, They want to say
Mhm.
goodbye and they'll send a sign or they'll come to say so long. And he said, you know, Nana loved you, and maybe that was just her way of saying goodbye. He said, when my grandma died, I saw her face in the clouds and I knew she was gone. And it turns out that during that 15-20 minutes that I was looking out the window is the time frame in which she passed away in her house with my grandmother with her. So um I don't remember too much after that. At one point I played with a Ouija board with some friends and we got freaked out and never did that again.
Yeah.
Um but then when my grandpa died when I was 17 years old, certain things started to happen. And I thought I was joking when I would say, "Oh, there's grandpa," if the lights flickered or something made a thud. But certain things continued to happen. And shortly after you and I met, around the 99 timeframe,
Mhm.
I had been on a wait list to see a Boston based psychic medium who was written up in Boston Magazine as Best of Boston Psychic Medium. And I thought, I need to go find out if this is something going on around me and
Mhm.
why these things are happening. And I had hoped to hear from my grandfather. And sure enough, I had a reading with her. I had actually just taken a home pregnancy test, went to her. She told me she had an older man, that he had a younger generation. She at first thought a child had passed. And then she said, "Oh no, he's correcting me. It's a future generation. Who's pregnant?" I had just taken the home test, but I didn't get it confirmed by the doctor. So I was like, I don't know. It
Oh
wasn't
my God.
clicking. And then I
Yeah.
went for the test at the doctor the following week, and she had told me that he was with a future generation. It's a
Yeah.
boy. And 9 months later, my first son came into the world. So
Yeah,
really
that's
neat
wild.
stuff.
Well, and it's interesting because, you and I've had many discussions on the people that you talk about, mediums, and you talk about a lot of them just, and I know there's fraud in it. And, like there's some people that have given a bad name to it. But
Yep.
because you're so close to me, and there's nothing I believe more than you, and because you've helped me, when my father died, and you remember the story of when my oldest daughter was born, that Hannah started staring in the room and just kept staring. And I was pregnant. It was right after my dad died. And I
Yep.
was pregnant with Alexander. And I remember calling you, being frantic, going, Hannah's staring at something. She literally had night terrors and was like trying to reach in her crib to get to something. And I remember, like, just remember calling you, being like, what was that? And you're like, your dad's trying to tell you he's okay, because I was so distraught. I was 20 weeks pregnant with Alexander. And I remember vividly, you were the one person I was like, this is something that you can help me explain. And that to me, like, and how do you, so leading into, does it come often? Like, tell me more about, because I've only had little glimmers of it. I have it more in my dreams, like missing obviously my parents, but does it come all the time? Like, how do you, because you really, it is, you're so, to me, tapped into it.
It's interesting, and having this conversation with you brings back things that I've sort of since forgotten or don't
Yeah, of
always
course.
think about. I remember, that when I had this reading with this medium, she said to me, "You have this gift," and I said, "Yeah."
Yeah,
And she's like, "Why are you saying it like that? You should explore it." And
yeah,
I was like, "I don't know." I had some mixed feelings about it because I was raised Christian, not overly religious, but
yeah,
Christian, and I worried about it conflicting with my connection to the Lord or a higher power, whatever
yeah.
you want to call it. I remember asking my teacher at the time, because the woman who did the reading for me, I did begin to study with her
Hmm.
class. Um, and I said to her, "But what about like evil spirits?" And she was cute. And she said to me, "Well, Paula, what do you do when you encounter an asshole in life?" And I said, "I avoid them. I tell them to go away." She goes, "Same with spirit. It's just," she said
Interesting.
that, yeah. And I think that some of the things that people say are haunted, that's earthbound spirits, or that's a different realm of things. But for me, I've been blessed to not have any really negative encounters. I
Mhm.
can tell when something feels off. I get a little strange feeling. But when I started to study with her, I didn't want to wake up at night and see a man at the side of my bed like I
Yeah.
did as a little girl. So I asked Spirit, "Please don't show yourselves. I don't want to see you." And unfortunately now I kind of wish I could see them. That's called oh my clairvoyance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have that capability really anymore. On occasion, I can see sort of an outline of somebody, but
Mhm.
for me, it's more clairsentient, which is sentiment, feeling. So I feel things. I can either feel a physical feeling they felt, or I can um, I can connect sort of with their thoughts. So it's like they put a thought in my head, and I kind of hear the thought. It's
Yeah.
clairaudience when you sort of hear, and I have to interpret. I've come over the years to sit in mediumship circles and practice and hone in, and spirit has different ways of communicating with everyone
Well,
that's a medium.
well, and I think the bad name of this has always been that, oh, well, there's someone that's at a studio and you go on TV and then they ask you questions and then they feed it. Those are the scammers. But you are starting to meet people where they're like, oh, I lost my mother, I lost my brother. And you know things that there's no way you would know about. You and I talked about a situation recently that you knew where someone's father was born. You had no idea. And those, like, so when you talk to someone, I'm fascinated because I'm just, you get that intuition going, wait, wait, wait. They are trying to tell me like how does it come through you? Because I find that fascinating. Like no one told you anything, you know it, and that's it's real.
Well, and a good psychic medium will tell the sitter, their client, the sitter,
Better.
you know,
Okay.
don't tell me anything. So I always
Mhm.
start off and I say, I don't want to know. I'm going to ask you, can you understand a female in spirit? She would have been, you know, this age. She would
Yeah.
have passed by the, like, she'll give me, I'll get a sense of who she was, personality wise, looks wise.
Yeah.
I generally sort of know if they're a peer or if they're, you know, more of a
Mhm.
grandfather, grandparent, or younger. I get that sense from them. They typically sort of show themselves to me in my mind's eye, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I can describe a little bit what they would have been like. And I'll say, can you understand that? Now, John Edward used to call it psychic amnesia. People are so excited to connect with the loved ones they've lost.
Hmm.
They're very eager to hear, oftentimes, from a specific person. And
Yeah.
I can't control who comes through. I can't.
Yeah.
And so I never want to promise, oh, I'll connect you to your dad. Sure. I
Yeah.
don't know. And if I did connect, I would want it to be, I wouldn't want you to tell me things like, oh, yeah, right before he died, we went, no, don't tell me, because
Yeah.
spirit will often give me images that I have to share with you.
Yeah.
So for example, a reading I did recently, I was reading a young woman and her grandpa came through and I
Hmm.
said, he's showing me a picture of you and him smiling, and you have your arms around each other and there's dancing involved. And she said when he came over to this country when she was a young girl, he took her to a father-daughter dance at her school. And it's a very vivid shared memory. Now, I couldn't necessarily know what that
What?
was. I just know
Yeah.
he's referring to this. You know,
And it was
sometimes
enough
I'll,
that she was like, "Oh my god, it was a dance. I remember that." Like, you brought enough that it she knew exactly what you meant. And there's no way you would know that. Like, how would
right.
you know that, you know?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't know if that was her and him or her and her father or her and he
Yeah.
just was referring to it. Names can be challenging. Sometimes I get them right on.
Mhm.
In this recent reading, it was interesting because I kept hearing um something that sounded like Bubba, Baba, and I said to her, "Did you
Yeah.
call him something that sounds like?" And she said, "That's exactly what I called him. It was
That's
in
so
his
wild.
language, it had a translation that was meaningful."
That's
And
so
he was able
wild.
to get me to say that. So those are
Is
the
it
parts that I feel
well,
excited about because I wouldn't know that. It's
yeah,
him, and it's just proof that our loved ones never leave us. They're
yeah.
still around.
I remember, especially, how close I was with my dad, and I remember you saying, like, "Do you want me to, like, do you want me to think about, like, is there any?" And I remember being so nervous because
Yeah.
I just didn't know what to expect. And over the years, I love hearing these stories because to me, I do agree. Like, as you know, I'm not a religious person, but I'm spiritual in the aspect that I do believe my parents are around me. We joke
Yeah.
about like symbols, like, my
Mm.
father died, I had one cardinal. My mother died, now I have a pair that sees me. And every time I mention them, or I talk to my sister or the kids around me, they're near me outside.
Yeah.
There's some level, there's something there. There really truly is. And do you, do you ever have when you have it's a sitter, when you have them,
Yeah.
do you sometimes have nothing? Have you ever had an experience where there's no one, like something doesn't come through to you to help? Does that ever happen?
No, but I did have a very interesting experience recently.
Hmm.
I try to practice. I have a friend who's very interested in psychic abilities, energy healing, energy work, all this kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
so she and I get together once a month and we'll take a book and do some exercises, or we'll practice psychometry with each other. Psychometry is where you take an object and you let the person hold it and just read the energy of the object and try to
Like
tell
what kind of
you.
object?
It can
What
be
would you take?
anything.
Hmm.
So I gave her a picture of the place that I got married where my grandfather had grown up. But it was upside down and like wrapped in a towel. So she didn't know for sure what it was. Could have
Hmm.
been a thin book, could have been the picture. And so, and you just sit and you connect to the energy and you try to feel into
Hmm.
that energy to see what that is. So we do things like that. And one of my other friends was very intrigued by this and she's a pet sitter. She sleeps often in older homes, and she's like,
Hmm.
Paula, I swear I sense spirits around in these older homes. And the part of the country I live in New England here, there's so many older
Yeah.
homes, there's so much
History.
history,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much history. And
Yeah.
so she said, can I join you and our other friend, can I join you one day when you guys practice? I'd like to, just be there. I said,
Hmm.
sure. I'm always up for practicing and perfecting things. So she was there, and I said, well, I have an older man here. I said, can you understand a grandfather or an uncle who would have looked like this? And she said, no. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I know he's here. I'll ask him
Hmm.
to step aside and see if there's someone else you can recognize. And I had given her a little bit of
Yeah.
additional background, and she said, wait a minute, wait a minute. She said, hold on. I think I know who it is. So she pulled up her phone and she showed my other friend that was sitting there. And my other friend went, oh my gosh. So it turns out this friend of mine pet sits at a home
Hmm.
where there's a guy, and I forget his name now. People could look him up. It's Adirondack Joe or Adirondack Pete. He lived in the town or next town over in a
Hmm.
home, and he was the guy who was like the founder of camping or something. And his home is very colonial. And
Hmm.
I described the interior. I've never been in the house. I described the interior of the house, this particular room, overlooking his grave on the property. He's buried on the property. And I said, there's people taking care of his grave. They're maintaining it. He's appreciative. She went back to the owners of the home, told them about it. And a few weeks later, they said, oh my gosh, we forgot to tell you. His grave's right there and we've been maintaining it and da da da. And so at first it was a little hard for her. And it's what I was saying about John Edward with the psychic amnesia. Sometimes people are focused on who they really hope to hear from,
Versus.
or they
Yeah.
forget, oh yeah, that was
Mhm.
great Uncle Billy, or so
Yeah.
sometimes it takes just saying to them, well, it's coming through really strong, let's
Yeah.
just make note of it and put it aside, because I also want to respect the spirit who's coming through. They're coming for a reason. they
Yeah.
they have a message they want to deliver, and I want to honor that. I want to be able to make them happy just like I make the sitter happy. So
Well, and it's
um
interesting because I do feel that, as I'm learning more about it through you, and I was telling you that I have 3 or 4 friends that are really starting to explore that they can do these things. And
yeah.
they've always realized it, but now as they get older, they're like tapping into it more, which I find also fascinating. And these are women that are really, 50s and older, that they're like, wow, I had this gift my whole life and I never really tapped into it. Um, but I find it interesting, and because it's always like, oh, it's a person with J. And I feel like
Right.
the way that you always talk, because we all know someone with a J, and that's always
Right.
made me like, I'm always on the skeptic side. But when things like that happen for you, it ties it all together to go, there is something that's like really coming through to you.
Right.
It's remarkable.
And
It's remarkable to me.
yeah, and when I do the readings, I'll say to the like I know certain strengths of mine, and
Hmm.
the longer I do this, the more I'm able to find time in my day to sit and meditate, connect, pray, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The more I I get clear and the stronger my connection to spirit is. And so my readings have become more evidential, more solid, so
You're almost more in
fulfilling.
tune to it. It's like a muscle. You're
Right.
exercising your muscle. And that's the
Exactly.
more you do it, the more you seem to be, I don't want to say spot on, but you're really in tune to it, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And it's, it's if I say to someone like I don't always hear names correctly,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a language barrier,
Yeah.
so I can't quite get it. So I'll just say, what
Yeah.
I've learned to do is I will have, sometimes I sit down before a reading and I'll connect with spirit and see if I can get something in what my teacher called a precognition. You sit and you try to connect ahead of time. And
Hmm.
I would write things down. And it's funny because when I'm in that zone where I'm connected to spirit, I blurt things out. I have to raise my energy. So sometimes I talk fast or I'll stand up.
Hmm.
But I forget what I say. I don't really remember. I'm just firing
That's
off what I'm
amazing.
seeing
Yeah.
and feeling.
Hmm.
And then somebody I read recently said to me, "You wrote it down. You gave me that paper and you wrote it down." And when I went home, I went, "Oh my gosh, that's right." Like, so it's great. And it's rewarding for me to have somebody give me that follow up, or, reading the testimonials people write for me. It's like, I've had people sit here in my home when I've done a reading and they'll say to me, "Can I hug you?" And I'm like, "Of course. I love it. It makes
Yeah,
me
if you've
so
met
happy."
Paula, she's a hugger like me. One of the best hugs you'll ever get in your life. Um, do you have a certain place you sit? Do you feel like you have a beautiful home in Connecticut? Like, do you have a place that you sit and go, "Oh, this is where I feel more connections," or can it be kind of sporadic throughout your house or kind of all around? Sporadic's not the right word. But
Well,
do you have that?
it's funny. So you asked if I have the ability all the time or whatever.
Yeah.
And in really odd moments, I'll be overcome with something. And one of the fun stories I like to tell about this, that's a little weird but funny. Um, at my old house in Massachusetts, my son was friends with a kid. We'll call the kid Joe. And they were friendly, and I knew the parents, and I thought the mom was a very sweet woman. And I had been upstairs, and I came downstairs to sit in my office on the first floor in the house. And in my mind's ear, I
Mhm.
heard Joe Smith's mom. And I knew it wasn't my own thought. I knew it was
Yes,
something
of
more. And
course.
so I kind of went, "Joe Smith's mom? What about her?" And I was online, and I was, as a comms professional, you have to be on social media. And I was on social media for work looking for something. And when I logged into my Facebook account, Joe Smith's mom's feed popped up. And right there was a feed that said, "Oh, my dad and sister went to this local medium, and I couldn't go. And, they enjoyed it," or whatever. And I thought, okay.
That's really odd.
So I'm like, they will give
Wow.
signs however they can give
Yeah.
them. And we all have this ability.
Yeah.
Everyone's born with the ability to be a little bit psychic or to
Mhm.
connect with spirit if they want to, but we're socialized to believe it's bad or evil, or we're socialized that,
And
"Oh,
when you're
it's
a
your
child,
imaginary friend."
but as you said, like when you're a child, I do believe that you have, like everyone talks about imaginary friends or whatever, but I do think children don't have those barriers. We're not
Right.
embarrassed as a child. That is like, the joke I always think of the Friends episode where Phoebe runs weird and
Yeah.
Rachel's like, "Why do you run like that?" It's like, because you should be free. And I do think children are free to have
Yeah.
we don't know what they think. We don't know what they see. And that
Right.
to me, and as you get older, and I think that's also the flip side of, I think you're more in tune than ever as you're, older than when I first met you. And I think you're more comfortable because it's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing to help someone be connected with someone they loved that
Right.
is no longer physically here. And that's what,
Right.
one of the questions I wanted to ask you is like, what do you want people to understand about this special talent? Because to me, you're not like, what I always had that image and stigma, it is so positive. It's such a good thing. And
Hmm.
like what would you want people to understand about this? Because I am fascinated, as you can obviously tell by my voice, but what would you want them to know about this gift that you really are in tune to and naturally are?
I think, as evidenced by entertainment, right? You've got the movie The Sixth Sense, you had that show
Mhm.
Medium on TV, you have, all these mediums out and about now doing group readings and private readings. And I think it's kind of like acupuncture became and
More
chiropractic in the
norm.
healthcare world, right? There's alternatives, there's other options.
Yeah.
And I think that it took a while for me to be comfortable and to step into it and say, I'm a psychic medium. I used to keep it secret. I used to
Mhm.
do readings at people's homes and not have information out about myself. It was like just word of mouth through friends. Now, you know, as I look at my life and what I hope to achieve,
Yeah.
one of my purposes for being here is to make a difference in the lives of others. And if that's through this gift of mediumship, if I'm able to, and I used to feel guilty taking people's money. They're grieving, they miss their loved one. I don't want to
Yeah.
take their money, but it is a gift I work to
Yeah.
hone. And I, now am developing my website and making it more public. And so I am investing time and whatnot. And you get
Yeah.
paid like a lawyer, like us in PR, you get paid for your
Yeah.
time. But it's
Absolutely.
so rewarding. And I feel
Yeah.
like what people should know is there's nothing to be afraid of. If
Yeah.
they go for a reading, you never want to feed the medium. So you don't want to say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to hear from my mom. She passed away 2 days ago." And
Yeah.
it's good. Sometimes it's even good to be skeptical. I had one lady I read about a year ago, and I could tell she was really skeptical.
Mhm.
And sometimes the spirits are the same. If someone in spirit would not have necessarily believed in my work or what I do,
Yeah.
they make me work harder, and I have to prove that I'm connected to them.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how I can get a sense of people's personalities, and I can say, "Oh my gosh, I feel the love," or "Oh, I feel the guilt," or "Oh,
But
it's
that's the
it's just
relationship,
amazing."
like, that to me is the key, and I'm sure you would agree that if you're gonna find someone that can help you, find someone that you have a relationship with that you trust, and that and know like, that to me is also important, that you just don't wanna go to any acupuncturist, you don't wanna go to any lawyer, you wanna go to someone that you trust that respects your personal feelings, and I think that you do that in spades, that's just your natural personality. And I'm sure that's part of your connection with people helps draw this all together.
Yeah, it's funny. I have great relationships, like you
Mhm.
said earlier, through work with friends, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't end. When they're gone, I still
It
have them.
doesn't end. But that's what, as I think of as we both go, okay, what are we doing in the next 10, 15 years? This is where I always thought your journey would go. I feel like you've had a lot of paths. The one other thing, there's so many other things I want to talk to you about, but when we were together, we also, if you don't mind, I want to talk about the cards, reading the cards,
Oh,
because
sure.
this to me is also now I have more friends that have bought decks and whatever. You're the only person I've let do a reading for me. And if you want to talk about what we did when we were in New York together, but I feel like that to me, you couldn't have been more spot on to the point where I was taking it like forever. Anyone that knows me, I'm like, oh my God, I want to capture it. We took photos of the
Yeah.
cards. How many? I picked five. Was it five
I
cards or
think you I
seven?
think
Five
you
or
did. Yeah, I don't remember now,
I
but
can't
yeah,
remember,
there's
5 or 7 cards, and you just said, "Hey, pick them," and, like, go through what you did, and it was just like, oh my god. It was incredible because it couldn't have been more spot on to my life and my, current situation and just me. Um,
yeah. And the thing, to tie to this card thing, going back to what you said, what should people know, right? What I believe is that we are all energy. We're all
Mhm.
made up of energy. And that energy doesn't go away just because our physical body isn't here. I believe every single one of us has a soul. I
Yeah,
believe we choose to be here. We choose life lessons we're going to learn. Some
yeah.
of us learn, some don't. Some of us, I
Takes
never would have
longer to
believed
learn.
in I never would have believed in reincarnation years ago. I thought it was like for loony people. And
Yeah.
then I started researching it. I started reading books about it, books by very scientific,
Mhm.
Harvard educated people who have had experiences. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is a real thing. And so we bring with us things from past lives or bring energy from our childhoods and whatnot.
Hmm.
And when you're no longer in the physical, sometimes that energy is healed, sometimes it's not, but you can,
Yeah.
things get forgiven. There's not the
Yeah.
stuff that was here when you're in the physical always. But with the cards, spirit, your energy, I started working with a deck of angel cards years ago. My
And
mom
is there a
bought them for
certain word for the cards? Like what it's just a card reading? What would you classify that
they're
as?
they're called oracle cards, the
Okay,
ones
thank
that
you.
I work with. Oracle cards.
Yeah.
Specifically, I very much like Colette Baron Reed has the decks that I
And
worked
they're
with you. Her decks,
gorgeous, beautiful.
yeah,
Like if for anyone that doesn't know, beautiful cards with these gorgeous images on it. Like it's captivating
yeah,
to see with the picture coming when you pick it. So keep going, but they're beautiful.
yeah. And it every time I work with the cards, whether I choose the card and do the reading on Zoom on a,
Hmm.
situation like this, whether it's over the phone, whether it's in person, whether I let you choose the cards, they're
Hmm.
almost always exactly what the person needs. The person says, "Oh
Hmm.
my gosh, I totally understand." And there's a variety of ways to work with them. You can choose one and just ask a question.
Yeah.
What's the next best step to take with this situation? And you get the
Hmm.
card. Or you can do a past, present, future layout. You can do, a variety of things. I think you
Hmm.
and I did a sort of a modified version of the past,
Hmm.
present, future. And it's the energy and it's spirit and it's your spirit guides and you get what you need. And it's really interesting. I pull from myself at times when I'm feeling unsure or anxious, and I always feel better after.
Well, and it's interesting because I know you can interpret the cards any way you want in some way because there's like the cards of description. It comes with the book, and like we went through, and but it was so spot on. Yes, you could
Yeah.
interpret. There's some cards that you'd be like, yes, you could make a some dotted line, but not to the level of like I could not believe how spot on it was.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was your interpretation to explain to me, like, oh, this is why
Right.
you got this card. And I was like, oh my God, because you know me obviously so well for so many years and know my life, um, all transparency. But that to me was also remarkable. Like, just
It's
remarkable
also
that
when you have more than one card, it's also how each card
builds.
plays with the other. They all, yeah, so it tells a bigger story. So it's
Well, and I was fascinated by one of the cards, and I have all the images. Like one of the cards was upside down. And you're like, well, if it
yep,
was this way, it meant this, but it was meant to be the other way. And it was, I remember it being upside down, and I forget what the card was. And it was like, yep, you were totally right that that was the direction. It had to be that way, not the other way. That's
right.
also pure, like how I picked that specific card.
And
Do
it
you?
also depends on the deck you're working with because some decks there's no intention for the
Yeah.
card to be perceived any other way than just face value. So it depends. You have to sort of know the deck and who created it and you know.
How often do you do reading card readings?
It's
Do you do that
sometimes
often, or do you do which form of like mediumship would you do more? And I don't. Do you classify all the both of these under mediumship?
not really.
Card,
I mean, so
card
what I'll
readings.
do is sometimes if I'm sort of inspired by spirit to do something in preparation for a reading with someone, I might pull the card deck out and say, Spirit's wanting me to start off having you pull a card or do a card reading for you.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes, this one reading I did recently, I felt compelled to go outside and cut lilacs and bring them in the house and have them displayed while this person was here. And it turns out that purple flowers and lilacs are significant to her. And um, sometimes I'm compelled to be sit outside and do the reading. Going back to the story of, Joe Smith's mom, I had those signs, right? And I finally
Mhm.
thought, I have to call her. She didn't know me all that well at that time. She's
Yeah.
very quiet, very private, and I had to push out of my comfort zone and call her. And I said,
By the
hey, do you have a
way,
minute? I said, do you have a minute? She's like, yeah, what's up? And I said, I saw your post on Facebook about the medium stuff. And I said, are you into that kind of thing? She goes, oh, not really. My dad and my sister wanted to go. And I'm kind of intrigued. And I said, well, um, I am a psychic medium. And she's like, what? And I still to this day don't know if that completely freaked her out. Um, but I said, well, I feel like I have your mom here. Is your mom in spirit? She's like, yeah. And I said,
My
"Uh,
God.
would you like a reading?" So when I did her reading, I said, I really feel like we should sit outside. And her mother was very much about outside and gardens, and it made perfect sense and it tied in with her personality. So
So you kind of
you
go
know,
where you, so that's a great, going back to my question about where do you sit, and
yes.
it kind of, you can kind of navigate that as well. That's
Yes,
wild.
but
Mhm.
going back to that question, because I feel like you and I are talking so much and there's so much we want to cover. But yes, so what I do at my house now
Mhm.
is I use my, the big living room. That's what I
Mhm.
call my reading room. And I've
And
got, yeah. And so for me to let spirit know I'm open and ready to receive them and to set the stage,
it's a
I light
perfect
some
room for that.
candles.
Yeah, that's a perfect
Yeah.
room.
Yep. And I
And you're
light
not in the
candles
room
even.
all the time. So I bet that is also comfort to you that when you do go in there, you
It's
use it,
intentional.
but
It's
it's
it's a
intentional.
special place for
Yeah,
that kind of
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I use it, I go in there. Um, and it's funny. One day in Massachusetts, I remember I was walking by myself in the parking lot of a grocery store. And in my head, I heard, help him. And I looked over and there was an older man like unloading groceries in his car. And I was like, help him. Kind of like the Joe Smith's mom. Like,
Yeah.
I know that spirit talking to me, but
Someone's telling you something. Hmm.
I'm going to walk up to the strange man and go, hi, do you need help? Like, no. And so in that instance, I ignored it. And this is where over the years you learn. And when I came out of the store, I had run in for like two things. I was in there all of 5 or 10 minutes. When I came out, the man was on the ground with EMTs and firemen all around him. And I said, oh my gosh, I should have been there. And I could have, and I felt like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'll listen next time.
Yeah.
And he was okay. I approached the first responders and I said, oh my gosh, I just saw him putting his stuff in the car. Is he going to
Oh,
be okay? And they said, yeah, he took a little spill. He's okay.
how
But I
wild.
felt terrible because
You keep giving
I
me
was meant,
chills. I got chills again because I'm like, yeah, you could have, not saying you could have prevented, but in theory, like that's wild.
I
That's
could have
really
at
wild.
least helped him sit down in the car and not fall down on the ground or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I've learned through the years how to differentiate and understand when to take action and when not to. And typically, if you have a connection to spirit, especially as it gets stronger,
Hmm.
it can be around all the time. It can be a little bit
And does it frighten
pervasive at
you?
times.
I know you said when you were a child you didn't want, and as you mentioned, you don't want like evil spirits. You
Right.
kind of want it to be the safer. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with this? Like, does it get to you where you're like, oh, and it's not like noise that you always hear, but you just feel presence?
No, that never bothers me.
Hmm.
If anything, it's more of my own ability to be an empath. I feel other people's feelings here and there. And
Yeah.
so sometimes that's more overwhelming than dealing with the
Well,
spirit world.
and you have it, in the daylight. You and I've talked about like my dreams. Are
Mhm.
so vivid, and that I'm
Yeah.
also definitely an empath that I get hurt by other people hurting. I just have always I had that as a little child. One of my kids
Yes.
has that too. A lot
Yeah.
of my dreams, I have that overwhelming. I wake up with emotions that are, to me, I don't think as normal as most people, that if my dreams absorb me, that I just feel whatever's in that moment. It's really tough because I have to shake it. Like if something bad happened, I cannot shake it all day. And I feel
Yeah.
like you have that so much during the day from having those kind of, feelings and intuition to a lot of this. I find it really remarkable. I feel like I could talk to you forever, and is there anything you'd want to, say? And I have one final question in a minute. Is there anything we talked about, you want people to understand? Is there anything else that, like, how do you, want to help people to tap into this, that, to help them when, as I said, everyone's lost someone they love. And
Yeah.
to me, you and your gift can help, I don't want to say closure, but help tie you to that person on a different level. Is there something that you want to highlight about that and how you can help people?
I think just, people that are afraid of it or unsure should be open.
Mhm.
I think, somebody that I recently read was a referral from a friend, and the friend said to me, my friend is really struggling. She's really going through some tough stuff and she's been grieving for a while. And, like, would you ever like say you had someone there just to make someone feel better? And I said, absolutely not. There's no
Yeah.
integrity there. I feel for people. But if I don't have a genuine connection for her, I don't have it. It's like you said about you want to go to a dentist you're comfortable with, you want to go
Mhm.
to a chiropractor you're comfortable with. You
Yeah.
know, people who come to me may go like, that was okay, it wasn't the best reading. They might have a much better connection with somebody else. What someone told me once with mediumship, and it really resonated, is, we're sort of here on this earth plane in AM mode, if you will, like on the radio. And so our bands are kind of like this, right?
Yeah.
And then their spirit is in FM mode. And I have to raise my energy and my vibration to connect with them. And they've got to lower theirs. And so sometimes different mediums can connect differently with different people.
Yeah.
And then there's times when, I did a group reading and this lady that I told you was referred by a friend, like 3 or 4 of her family members came through and everyone else was like, oh my gosh, her whole family's coming through. When
It's
it's
like a
meant to
heartbeat.
be and it
It
flows,
just
it flows.
yeah.
Yeah. So, go to more than one. If you find one you click with, that's great. Be open to it. And it can be, it's challenging. I had somebody come through recently and this young woman said, I don't want to hear from them if it's who I think it is. And I said, well, sometimes you're meant to.
Yeah.
I'll ask the person respectfully to step aside, but just be open. There may be a reason that the person wants to leave you with something. But if
God,
you
I
don't
hope I
let,
don't have some people hiding in the back. No, just kidding. That are be like, I have been meaning to talk to her. No, no, but that's interesting because it's true. There's some you might not be open to it, but there are people that have something to say and that you can
well,
help with.
even for me as a medium, there are people I was very close to when I was younger who were good friends, who were like family to me, who've passed away, who've never once come through in a reading. My
Yeah.
uncle passed away and I loved him deeply, and he sort of passed away tragically, and I have never had him come through for a reading. I think he came through to me once for my cousin, and I did follow up with her on that. But sometimes they just don't, and I
Yeah.
just accept
Who
what
comes
is
and who?
meant to be.
Yeah, what is meant to be. So you know what it's making me want to do another reading with you. I'm like, oh, I really do. Like, I know I've been apprehensive, and I think you opening my eyes to this world of, it's what your natural gift is, and I want to tap into it more. I think my eyes were opened even more when you did the card reading because
Yeah,
you're in tune to it, and I felt so comfortable and honestly safe because
yeah,
I'm always apprehensive. I'm the skeptic in the end about a lot
yeah,
of these things, as you know. um
right.
so I want to leave you with one last question, and I could talk to you, and there's so many other topics. I do want to have a conversation. There's many other topics. You'll see Paula again. I want to do
Mhm.
a closing question on what empowers you, what inspires you.
I think what inspires me is remembering that there are people that are hurting every day. There are people that are struggling every day. And if I can dig deep to be kind, if I can make a positive difference, if I can touch just one person's life in a way that makes it better, where they don't feel lonely, where they feel appreciated, valued, validated, seen, heard, that's my inspiration. That's what keeps me going. I just genuinely care about people and want to be of service in this iteration of my physical time here on earth.
God, is that beautiful? And it is so you in every aspect of the word. Really, truly, Paula, you've been an inspiration without me getting weepy. I always feel like I get weepy at this part. You've been inspiring to me all these years. You continue to inspire me with your strength, courage, just living your best life and fighting through any obstacle. I'm honored to have you in my personal inner circle. I love learning about this. This was, for anyone who doesn't know, like I was on a long flight and I kept writing in a notebook that Paula's the next one I wanted on this show. And we talked and she mentioned this, and I was like, there was some connection that I needed to talk to you about this topic now. So it's
Yep.
just full circle of, this was what I want to learn more, continue to learn. And just I'm so appreciative of you, and thank you for inspiring me and many others. Stay tuned for more episodes of Her Stories, and I will put Paula's contact information for anyone who wants it. And Paula, it's always an honor. Love seeing you and talking to you. And thank you for teaching us about this really cool area that I think more people should tap into. So thank you.
You're welcome. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And next time I will have another episode of Her Stories coming up soon. Thank you, everyone.